guys, how's it going? So I think it's time to have another E6K video. Now I know this has taken a really long time to get out there, and I apologize for that. It's just been a ton of problems, a ton of changing of the mind to figure out how to address those problems, and a bunch of other stuff. So I apologize. I know it's been over a year since the last one, but hopefully today we can make up for all of that. So the good news is that the E6K at this current moment in time is running. It is currently running Debian Linux, the Spark 64 variant of Debian Linux, which, as I understand, isn't currently a release architecture for Debian, so there's no like official Debian archives or installation trees or anything like that. But over on the Debian ports website, there are quite a bit of resources and a very, very well put together package tree. So hopefully, I understand that they're working on making that a release architecture in the near future. Hopefully that all happens. I really do. That would be a great thing to have happen in kind of the Spark world for Linux. I will probably end up installing Gentoo Linux. Actually, I will end up installing Gentoo Linux on this box. I've been working with the Gentoo community for a while now, building my own Spark 64 port of that operating system. And that's going very well. I would say it's over 90% complete. At this point, it's just fixing little bugs here and there that are kind of annoying. But it runs stable, and it's been working great on a lot of my other machines. So I will be installing that on here. Unfortunately, it seems like I'm the only person with the knowledge of how to port that operating system to a new platform. It seems like I'm the only one with real interest in that. So I know there are some people there who are users who are interested in it, but as far as I know, I'm the only one working on it at the moment. So hopefully I can get all that worked out soon, and I can get all that pushed out to the Gentoo site and everyone else can take advantage of it. I also have some parts here that I've ordered over the past couple of weeks, and I'll go over those real quickly with you, what I want to do with them, and then I'll go over the E6K and its current state and some of the things that will be changing, and then maybe we'll take a look at it booting and such. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here's some of the parts that I've ordered over the past few weeks, like I was talking about. I guess we'll go ahead and start off with this. This is a PCI IO board for the E6K, also for the E5, 4, and 3Ks as well. They all use the same kind of bus, so they use the same boards. These ones are a lot, I guess, more simple or simpler, whatever the correct word for that is. So you'll notice on the front, they basically just have a single-ended SCSI and a 10100 Ethernet port, and that's it, nothing else. And then it has two PCI X slots on the top. These ones happen to be 5-volt slots. Basically, there's like a bridge connector down here, and these can either be 3.3 volts or 5 volts, depending on which risers you have installed. This one came to me with 5-volt risers, which should be fine for what I need it for. Hopefully I don't have to go around and buy different riser cards. Here's some SCSI cards. These particular SCSI cards, these are Ultra 1 single-ended SCSI cards. These are just standard PCI, not PCI X. And I basically just got these because they are specifically mentioned in the Sun documentation as being compatible with the E6K. Ideally, if everything works out with what I want to test here, I wouldn't actually use these. I would go try to find some Sun Ultra 3, maybe. Ultra 3, I believe, is a differential only, so differential only interface. There's no single-ended unless it's running in like backwards compatibility mode or whatever. So ideally, I wouldn't end up using these. I would end up using some better ones. This is a PCI X 4-port gigabit card. It's also a Sun card. I might test this out today just to see if it works. This will give me some insight as to whether newer cards that are no longer or that aren't in the Sun documentation for this particular machine will still be compatible with this machine. So I know they'll probably be compatible at a operating system level, but I need them to be compatible at the Open Boot Prom level. So we'll see how that plays out. providing all this plays out, these are two cards that I have. These are S-Bus cards. These are the current I/O boards that are in this machine are S-Bus cards, and S-Bus uses this connector. It's like a Sun proprietary expansion system. It was used a lot in like the 32-bit Spark days. It kind of phased out around the E6K generation, which would have been like late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere in that area. S-Bus is great, in my opinion. If you actually do some research or technical research on PCI versus S-Bus, you'll see a lot of areas where S-Bus makes a ton more sense as far as actual expandability of a system. A lot of the things PCI has built into it is really rudimentary at best. Linux actually has very good S-Bus support for cards. The problem is that the drivers, so for example, like the S-Bus subsystem is very well supported in Linux. But now, like this is a great example. This is a Sun Gem fiber optic Ethernet type card, 1 gigabit. And the PCI variant of this card runs great in Linux. The S-Bus variant does not work at all, simply because the Sun Gem interface driver doesn't have S-Bus support, but it has PCI support. Whereas the driver for this is a QLogic ISP 1000 Ultra 1 differential SCSI card. And the driver for this particular card has both S-Bus and PCI support. So it's not only the fact that Linux has to have S-Bus support, it also, the driver for the particular card itself has to have S-Bus support as well. And that's why I'm kind of looking at these PCI boards and seeing if this will be a better solution. Because ideally I'd really like to use these in theory, because I have a bunch of these lying around, which are these, I think these are SC to LC converters, but this is what I believe is an SC. I might be mixing these up, but this is what I believe is an SC fiber connector, which would come into this, which is the standard, what I believe is called LC. And that will plug into my networking switches a lot better than these, of course, but also I will have full gigabit support instead of 100 megabit. And yes, I know I could just use these as well, but ideally I have a lot of empty fiber slots above this in the particular switch in this console, or in this configuration that I have. Actually, I'm not using any of the fiber slots, so that's a cool way to use them. And I really don't think I have any need for what I would say is 8 gigabit slots on this particular machine, simply because you can't, for redundability, I don't even know if that's a word. But anyway, for redundancy, that's probably the word I'm looking for, redundancy. But for redundancy purposes, you would need 2 of these cards, right? Ideally in different I/O slots. So if one card died or one whole I/O board died, you still had networking connectivity. And then I would have 8 gigabit slots. And me being a perfectionist, I'd want to use all 8, and I don't think I need all 8. So we're going to go for the fiber ones. Awesome. So I also have one of these. This is an AUI to 10 base T Ethernet converter. This is the AUI, that's the Ethernet. That is because there's a device that I've just installed on the rack, which I will show you in a little bit, that this is going to become an extreme use for, extremely handy at least. So I will show you what this will be used for in the next portion of the video. So let's go ahead and look at the E6K. Okay, so here's the top of the front of the E6K. I have a bunch of these cables hanging out. I'll tell you about those in a second. But at the very top here we have a fiber optic kind of modem slash gateway, I guess. An internet connection from our provider comes in here, and this basically just gives us some network ports to plug into it. This is what I was telling you about before in the video that I need the converter for. Let me go ahead and grab that converter. So what this is a Cisco, I can't remember the name of it. So I believe it's the Cisco AS2509RJ. If I'm wrong about that, please correct me. Actually, never mind, it's right there. Yes, AS2509RJ. Basically what this does is I can take the console cables from every machine in this rack, so the E6K and these 3 Sun V240s, or sorry, V210s, they can all plug into these console ports. And then I can either plug a single serial console cable, or using this AUI to Ethernet adapter, which goes right here, I can have network telnet access to all of these machines at the console level. So the V210s actually have network consoles on them, but the E6K does not. But having them all centralized in one unit is quite nice. So that's what these cables are for. These 4 yellow cables are all console cables. There's 3 here and 1 for the E6K, and they will all plug into these console plugs, and then I can have centralized access to it here, or like I said, over Ethernet. This is the Ethernet that will plug into this AUI converter when I terminate it, so it'll kind of go in like that. Yeah, so I want to terminate these tonight. The problem is I left my termination kit at home, so I'll have to go grab that before I get to the installation part of this video. So down here, the 2 V210s, or the 3 V210s. As you see, this bottom one's missing its faceplate. I'll get around to getting another one at some point, but basically, they are just, it's pretty simple. Sun V210, 2 UltraSpark 3s, 16 gigs of RAM, fairly simple boxes. The top one here is a router. Basically, it's configured to be a router, as well as DHCP and DNS, or local DNS anyways. These 2 down here are public DNS servers, so they actually host domain information out to the public. So they're redundant. NS1, NS2, and then NS3 and NS4 are in a different building somewhere. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for. These kind of need cleaned up a little bit, and I need to get a new faceplate. And eventually I'm going to buy like another V210 just to have laying around for parts. So when I do that, I'll have a faceplate to put on this one. So yeah, that's kind of the front. Let's step back and we'll look at the bottom side. Actually, before I do that, back here, you will see 2 Sun DVD drives. I've replaced the CD-ROM drive with a DVD drive, and then took out the tape drive and put a second DVD drive. So they're CD burners and just DVD readers. I've got a key that works for the key switch now, which is just a Sun generic key, which thankfully is pretty easy. They're pretty easy to find. So yeah, this is all working great. All the lights work perfect. So now let's take a look at the bottom. So basically, I have a bunch of CPU boards, 7 I believe. The bottom one here is a blank, so 7 CPU boards. Each one has 2 gigs of RAM and 2 333 megahertz processors, so I have 14 processors and roughly 14 gigs exactly of RAM. So I want to expand this out to more at some point. I would like to have it, I think I have this, the way I have it set up, I should be able to have around like 24 processors and 24 gigs of RAM. And I'd like to have all the processors be 400 megahertz modules, but I've not had time to get around to that yet, so that has not happened. But, full power supplies, I've had to replace probably 4 or 5 power supplies from when I first got the machine, because quite a few of them are dead. But, this whole section's all ready to rock and roll. This is the first Sun D1000. This is a ultra SCSI disk array. It's a dumb disk array, so there's no RAID or anything pre-programmed in this. I just run ZFS on the main system to kind of work this out, which is what I wanted. I could have bought an A1000 should I wanted RAID features, but I really wanted to use RAID 10, and ZFS offers a lot of really powerful things on this box, so that's the way I did it. And down here I have a second D1000. You'll notice a few disks are missing. These 2 disks without the labels on them, those run the operating system. There should be a disk here, but it failed, and I haven't gotten around to replacing that yet. These here are also for the operating system. I just currently have 2 in RAID 1, and that makes sense for now. Should I want to have like 4 in RAID 1, I can do that. Every other disk you see is just part of the data disk. These are 73 gig drives, and the rest are all 300 gig drives. So a decent amount of storage. What's that, like 3 or 4 terabytes once you put it in RAID. So yeah, so that all works well. everything's coming along. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this around and we'll take a look at the back of the unit. Okay, so here's the current state of the back of the unit. More or less, we got a Cisco 3560 switch here. These cables are all fairly neatly pulled apart, but this is the first first V210, second V210, third V210. This one here, I believe, goes to that console manager. The rest of these all go down into the E6K. We have 4 SCSI cables. Each of those come down here. Right now the the D1000s are configured in what's called split bus mode. Split bus mode is basically taking all 12 drives, cutting them down the middle, and say these 6 drives go over this SCSI cable, the other 6 drives go over this SCSI cable, and so on and so forth. I will probably keep it that way, but for today's testing, I will be putting them in single bus mode, so that's all 12 drives over one SCSI cable. And we will do a little bit of testing with that PCI IO board that I was talking about. We have a bunch of console networking cables here. This is where the public internet comes in. These cables I was talking about earlier, I really want these to go here and then get rid of all this. So maybe one day, well, I'm definitely gonna try it here in the next few weeks or so. I haven't fixed that aluminum bar that went across the bottom here that got bashed in. I've not fixed this yet, so this is kind of just hanging. This is the power distribution module and all that fun stuff. Tons of power cables. The V210s all have cable management arms, which you would think would be a great thing. You would think, oh, cable management arms, they make life easier because you can pull the server out without unplugging everything. And on that end, yes, it's useful, but these cable management arms from Sun are really not that great. They like to catch on things as you're pulling the machine out. It likes to catch on either the other cable management arms or anything else anything else that could possibly be in the way. The real way to do this, and I might do it here in the near future, is wrap all of the cables in the cable management arm in like a single piece of like some kind of flexible conduit type stuff. That way they can't catch, like one cable can't catch on something and try to pull itself out of the arm, which is really, really annoying when it happens. So yeah, I think that's just about it. I mean, I've shown you guys the rest of this before, the fan module and all that fun stuff. So yeah, what am I doing today? I guess that's a great question. So basically, I want to pull all of these I/O boards out and just run a single PCI board. I don't think I have enough blanks to do that, so I'll probably have to leave these 2 in. But I want to take this top module out, put in the PCI IO board with those SCSI cards, and plug 2 of these SCSI cables in, put it in joint bus mode, and then see if I can boot Linux from just those SCSI cards, from just the PCI IO board and the SCSI cards that are plugged into it. And the reason I want to do that is I want to make sure that if I were to switch this whole system to a PCI setup, that number 1, it'll still work. Number 2, if I can do that, I should very easily be able to run these things. I was telling you earlier, the PCI version of this card, which Linux does have drivers for. And if that can happen, then I can get rid of this and plug those fiber cables into there, and hopefully get a little more reliability out of it. The S-Bus drivers, like I said, are very well put together, but S-Bus support in the sub drivers, if you will, is not so much very well put together. So every like 3 months or so, one of these cards will panic the system, and it's not that big of a deal, right? You just reset the box. This box only takes 90 minutes to reboot. So, and I'm not joking, it literally takes over an hour for this thing to do a power on self-test and get everything together. And it is a slow machine. I don't attribute that to how slow it is. I attribute that to how in-depth the onboard diagnostic system on this is. I mean, it literally tests every inch of every IC on this board before it brings the system up. Each S-Bus card, and I don't know if the PCI cards are the same way, but each S-Bus card has its own diagnostics routine built into their firmware so that when the diagnostics code starts running on this box, it can go to that SCSI card and say, hey, run your diagnostic code. And then this SCSI card takes 5 minutes to run diagnostics, and then this one takes 5 minutes, and this one, and then these two Ethernet cards take 5 minutes, and then there's built-in SCSI cards on these I/O boards that take 5 minutes, and you see how this adds up pretty quick. Especially when you start adding in, well, we got to test 14 CPUs, 14 banks of RAM, all of that lovely fun stuff. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and get started kind of tearing this apart as gently as possible. Stick in the PCI IO board and take it from there and see if we can boot this. I have a very strong suspicion that when we attempt to boot it, it will probably fail at first because I'll be missing some drivers, but I will figure all that out and then subsequently try to reboot it and see where we can get to going. So let's go ahead and get started in putting all this together. Okay, so we have the Cisco AS2509, the Cisco AS2509 set up, and it is running beautifully. It works really, really well. So if you're looking for something to set up all your serial consoles through one telnet box, that machine, or I guess that appliance, or router, or whatever it is, accomplishes that task really, really well. So just as a proof of concept, we'll telnet into it. So you want to telnet to the IP address. Oops, wrong one. And so the starting point is 2000. So all the ports are 2000. So like ports 2001 that's going to be port 1 for a serial console. 2002 is port 2. You get the idea. So we'll get into 2001, which is my router. So I can log in here. And there we go. Got like ls on the root file system or whatever, so sweet. I can exit out of that. And we need to escape, which is Control Shift bracket, and then we can quit out of telnet. Perfect. So, let me clear the screen. We're going to telnet to that same IP address because I'm going to go to 2004. That is where the E6K is. Now, right now, it's doing nothing because the E6K is turned off. So I'm going to go take this key real quick, shove it in there, turn it on, and we'll be able to watch all of the output of the E6K right onto the main screen. You can see there, it just says hardware power on. That's all it's going to tell you until it actually comes up. I could start it in diagnostics mode, but like I said earlier, that literally takes forever. How about this? I will do a diagnostics mode at the end of this video. So at the end of the video I'll do a diagnostics mode, but for now we are just going to wait until this thing eventually turns on. Okay, so looks like the E6K finally came up. Looks like you can see kind of up here, looks like that NVRAM battery in that PCI IO board that I just picked up is dead. I swear, whatever their chips are called, M48T59s, those things, yeah. Those things are going to be the death of me. Luckily, I can just pull one out of the old I/O board that I removed, but they're kind of a pain to deal with. The E6K isn't so bad because it has literally one of those chips on every I/O board, so if you kill one, you still have all the rest of them to keep your ID-PROM data, but now you just have like 7 chips to keep track of, so I guess it's a double-edged sword, but regardless, at least they're replaceable. So you can see we failed to boot. That's because I moved that whatever it was. I moved those cables to the new SCSI cards, which my old Open Boot PROM configuration has no knowledge of. So the first test we're going to do is just to see, can the E6K see the drives plugged into the new PCI SCSI cards? That will be the first question. Looks like those single-ended cards can't detect the differential D1000s, which is really, really, really dumb. So here's where I think I can go from here. So this card and that card are both the 2 PCI cards. I can replace these with newer PCIX versions that support the Ultra 3 protocol, which means they should also support differential because Ultra 3 is only differential. So yeah, with any luck, I can just get different ones and those will work. But for the time being, what I think I'm going to want to do is I'm going to go move those cables back to the S-Bus cards so I can actually boot the system. Then I'm going to take this network interface PCIX card with the quad RJ45 outputs. I'm going to take that and put it inside the PCI IO board and see if see if Linux is able to detect those cards. I'm also going to leave one of these in there. That way I can also check to see if Linux will detect the driver for that card, because these are ISP 1040 QLogic chips. I know these S-Bus QLogic chips are ISP 1000s, so theoretically they should use the same driver. But my theory is that if it can detect these PCI cards and actually assign the correct driver to them, then the ISP 1060 QLogic chips, which are on the newer SCSI cards that I will have to order, it will probably detect those too. So all is not lost. We're just at a point here to where single-ended SCSI cards can't access a differential array. That's just how it is. So I'm going to go move some cables around, and the next time I boot, we'll boot in diagnostic mode so you guys can see a very sped up, lengthy process of how long this thing actually takes. Okay, so we are back at the laptop. I've connected to the Telnet session for the E6K serial console. I've also got this little stopwatch set up just so you guys can get an idea of how long this actually takes for this machine to boot up. So I'm going to start this, go run into the server room and turn it to diagnostic mode. So this will be off for a few seconds because I actually have to go do that after I press start. But you'll get a general feel for it. So let's go ahead and get started. So we got the magical post complete. So looks like this actually didn't take as long as I as I thought it did, I guess. I guess I was over exaggerating a little bit. It's possible that when there's a bunch of stuff going on the screen just because it's in the diagnostics mode here, just probing all of the S-Bus cards. But it's possible that when there's an actual hardware failure, which in the early days when I was doing this, there were tons of hardware failures. It's possible it takes a lot longer when it actually comes across a hardware failure. So looks like it takes about 15 minutes to post. Not too bad. So let's see if we can boot into something. It's going to boot into net because I'm in diag mode, which I don't really want to do. Can I cancel that? Probably not. It should just time out and let me pick a boot device. Fingers crossed. Come on. Jeez. Are these numbers right? Trying to make sure it's not using the serial number from the other boards, which it doesn't look like it is. So and I don't see any way to disable this. Actually, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter at that point because I copied all of those to the clock chips earlier on. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go reset the box and put it in non-diag mode. And I'm not going to bore you guys with that boot up. You've already seen it once. So yeah, just make sure I can boot back into Linux. Okay, so we are booted into Linux. As you can see, it's complaining about some cable down, or some cables being down. It screwed up my Ethernet, or my networking configuration because of that new card I added in has actually taken the place of some of the other Ethernet devices in my configuration as far as it was concerned. So with that new Ethernet card in, my configuration is technically wrong, so I will probably have to pull that card out and then reboot because I don't feel like redoing all of that just because of a card that I just wanted to test to see if it worked. So let's go ahead and get in here as long as I can. And we are in. I just want to see LSPCI before that thing comes up, just to see what it finds out. Alright, so yeah, so you can see the Saturn 10, 100, 1000 Ethernet controller. That's one of those PCI cards. We have those SCSI controllers, the QLogic ISP 1020s. Perfect. I'm surprised those came up, unless I have the firmware. I only have ISP 1000, so the ISP 1020 must not need firmware. Let me double check this. LSPCI okay. Alright, so we got Cassini modules for those. Yeah, oh, it's a QLA 1280 is what is actually there, so it's not the QLogic PTI driver. Okay, so it's a different driver. It's the wrong driver. I thought it was going to be using a different one, but that is fine. So looks like the PCI IO board is a complete and total success, and yeah, that makes me happy. So theoretically, if you don't need to boot from the network, you could replace this PCIX card with like a more well-known Intel PCIX card. You won't be able to boot from the network simply because those generic Intel cards don't have open boot prom firmware in them to do the net booting. But if you don't care about that, and you're like me, and you're only using your network cards once you're in the OS, you can use any PCIX card you want. So that doesn't matter. The only thing that has to be Sun specific or the SCSI controllers just so they can boot, and not all of them, by the way. Only the only one that needs to be specific to Sun is the SCSI controller that actually boots. So if I had one SCSI controller that only handled the boot devices and then everything else was a different SCSI controller, that would be fine. So yeah, awesome. It's a fast wide SCSI. I'm surprised. Man, it must just be the single-endedness that makes it not work. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and power that box off so I can pull out that I can pull out the Ethernet card so it doesn't screw up my configuration, and restart it and then go home because it is, as you can see, like almost 2 in the morning. So yeah, I would say this is a success. So where does this leave us? Well, I think I'm going to end up buying some more PCI IO boards. Going to be getting some different SCSI controllers, something that can handle the D1000 easily. And yeah, and then from there I'll probably go to install Gen 2 and reconfigure a bunch of stuff for that, which will be fun. If I do a third video, it may be more Linux focused on how to actually get Linux running on this. I'll probably cover both Debian and Gen 2. I also have this wonderful idea to actually take an Arduino and turn it into a system controller, because the one thing this box lacks is a system controller, right? You turn it on and it goes straight to the open boot prom, where a lot of other newer Sun systems have a system controller where you log into that interface first and you can tell the system controller, hey, power on the system, or hey, connect to the console, or put it in diagnostics mode, all that kind of stuff. You can do that remotely. I feel like I could do that with an Arduino and some relays for the different key positions, and then kind of program together a serial interface on the Arduino that would sit in between the serial lines, in between the serial line of the E6K and the AS2509. So that way I could interface with the Arduino, go to the Arduino and say, hey, power on the box in normal mode or diagnostics mode or whatever, and then it would artificially control the key switches via relay switches. So then it would power on the box. I'd have that control remotely, because right now if I need to reset this box, like a hard reset, the only way to do that is to actually physically walk up to it and turn the key off and turn it back on, which is somewhat annoying if you're not always around to do that. So yeah, I have some ideas for video 3, and we'll just see how that goes. So if you guys have followed me through this whole video, I graciously appreciate it. This has probably been a long one. But hey, the E6K is running, and a lot of the things I want to do with it are looking good. So you guys take it easy, and I will keep chugging along. Thanks again.